There's a whole bunch of AI SDRs coming out right now. The purpose of somebody in sales, beyond closing the deal, is a trusted business consultant. I really like how you guys call yourself GTM engineers, like an engineer who can help somebody with their go-to-market.
You can never scale as fast as you can scale inbound, so you always have to revert to outbound at some point. Marlies, thanks for stopping by Clay HQ. Tell me again, how did we originally meet?
I think we started working with the Clay team, and I knew Everett from his previous role. I knew a whole bunch of people here at Clay. I remember visiting the old office back in Brooklyn back in the day. And when we started with Letterdrop at Clay, you were just like the guy who got it instantly. And so I started seeing you post a ton. And I also loved your newsletter. And so I think we just started talking more, and here we are at Clay HQ.
Yeah, we've been jamming out for like a while on all these things. Yeah, I love Letterdrop. Like, I was spending so much time just really thinking about like each post, how do I create like a good hook or create ideas, bring it into the post, and like you're just like helped me automate that process. So it's like super cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you're using it.
But yeah, like before Letterdrop, like what were you doing? Like what's your story?
Yeah, my story. So before this, I was a product manager at Google. I worked on the search team and then on G Suite, Google Workspace, whatever they call it now. And obviously, like, big company, not quite for me. I think I'm more of a startup person at heart. So I quit with no plans of what the hell I was doing.
No plans.
And spent like a year or two just like building like micro SaaS apps, just sort of things which could be like lifestyle businesses. And then did YC, and Letterdrop kind of came from that. And Letterdrop was originally a tool for SEO, actually, because I worked in the search team at Google. I was like, hey, I feel like I understand this better than most of the people out there in the world, and I think I can help B2B companies with that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I feel like LLMs kind of took off during that period. ChatGPT launched probably a year after we started. And I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, hey, I don't know if the future of SEO, I don't know what's going to happen with Google, I don't know how people are going to start searching for information. And in that period of time, I looked into what we really knew how to do, and we were building a lot of our pipeline from LinkedIn. Like 64% of our pipeline comes from LinkedIn. And I feel like we just got really good at it. And all the other channels were slowly starting to decay. Like email was getting harder. There's just more noise, just more people spamming folks.
Yep.
And so LinkedIn, with this kind of like face-to-face relationship building, public education, was just doing way better for us in terms of actually building pipeline. And so this year we were just like, you know what, screw it. We're just going to go all in on this. And that's been going great so far. And I guess that's how we met as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of my history. And I think my history with Clay, like the team at Clay, is also interesting because I met Kareem probably like 12 years ago.
Oh, no, 12 years ago.
Yeah. He gave me my first internship, and then small world, like it's like years and years later, we're here reconnecting, and everyone's doing something a little bit different.
Very cool. Yeah, we're using Clay internally in our GTM engineering team, and we also see like a ton of traffic and leads coming from LinkedIn. Obviously through like all the influencers that we're leveraging, but now we're also building our GTM engineers into almost like micro influencers. So Letterdrop's helping us do that. Where do you see the future of like LinkedIn or marketing on LinkedIn like headed? Are you seeing more people wanting to create like a founder brand or increase branding? Like, how are you seeing that evolve?
I think there's a desire for most people to do that. I think there are a lot of like holdups, like keeping people from actually executing on that. So I think the way people perceive LinkedIn today is, hey, this is a channel for us to dump ad dollars into, which works. Don't get me wrong, it's a great channel. If you want to just drop $1 million on advertising, like you can get a certain amount of reach. Now, is that scalable? Is that high conversion? There are all these open questions about that. The second way in which I see companies using LinkedIn today is standard in-mails, DMs, your pitch slap. A lot of people are a little bit apprehensive of connecting with a seller, like an AE or a BD or an SDR, because they know what's going to happen right after. And I think a lot of people need to figure out how to use LinkedIn in a way that feels authentic and feels like actual relationship building. For example, if you go to a conference, you don't just go walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm like Alex at Clay, and here's what we do, and can I get 30 minutes of your time? That's pretty abrasive. People wouldn't necessarily react really well to that, but that's what we're doing digitally today. And so I think people need to really think about giving and earning the right to ask for somebody's time, and that's really what we're trying to help companies do on LinkedIn as well. And Saad Khan, he's at Align, he had this really good phrase where he's just like, you need to make deposits before you can withdraw.
I like that.
And the same thing applies to sales, everything in life. Like, you need to give before you can ask for anything. And what you are doing in sales when you're asking for someone's time is like, you need to like show value or prove value first.
It's so funny you mentioned the conference analogy, because my first job out of school, when I was like learning how to sell, the VP of sales used the analogy of like, if you're in a bar and you're going up to like approach someone, you don't just go into like your personal history and your pitch. You want to find some level of like a commonality or like comment on something to like open up that like conversation. So definitely like relate to that. That was in the context of like dating. He was also coaching me on that too.
Oh, you're married, kid, so it worked out.
So it all works out.
I'm sure you went up to your wife and you're like, hey, I want to get married on your first day.
Exactly. You want to book a demo? Love that. Yeah. So we're using it. There's some pretty cool automations that I know like you built out. We're building out like internally. I'm starting to build it into like more of like my workflows. One of the things I love is like taking like, I have all these interesting conversations with customers like all throughout the day, the week, internally. And a lot of times they're recorded like on Gong or whatever you're using. And what's helped me so much is like now I just click a button and those get kind of turned into one of these like viral type posts. And you can choose one of the kind of like templates that you have, like a contrarian view or do X instead of like Y. So that's like really neat. How do you think about the future and like what you're building next for LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you're seeing value from that. I think there's two parts of LinkedIn over here. One is demand creation, which is what you're doing. How do you put more out into the world? So a lot of people talk about intent data. The problem is like you can't collect intent unless you create the surface area to collect intent. And so what you're doing by posting is essentially giving people the canvas to say like, hey, this resonates with me. I'm a person who's interested in this topic. And you're opening the door for me to raise my hand and tell you like, I might be interested in talking to you. And so I think on the demand creation side, we just want to make it easier for companies to take their internal data or their internal thoughts, sales calls, I don't know, decks, docs, whatever, and without a lot of work, turn that into public assets to tell the story of like how you help your customers so that other prospects who look like your current best fit customers can come to you. And I think the second part of this is like making sure it gets seen, making sure you're going ahead and connecting with potential buyers. And then the last part of this is actually using that data, actually identifying, hey, who might be in market or who is aware of problems we solve, who's talking about problems we solve, who's kind of like in our orbit, and utilizing that in terms of your ad retargeting, in terms of your outbound. And that's where we use Clay. So we're also Clay customers. And we use Clay not only for enrichment, which I know a lot of people use Clay for, but also for aggregating signals from a lot of different sources, one of them being Letterdrop and account scoring, so that we can actually figure out who do we want to reach out to at any given point in time. Because the last thing we want to do is burn out our business development team by giving them the universe accounts to go after. The folks at Orem have this really great phrase. They call them, I think Colin over there, he's their SVP of sales, he calls it hot tub accounts. Essentially, you have the ocean, and then you have like a lake, and you have a hot tub of warm leads you want to go after at any point in time. And so he just wants to make sure his sales team has a hot tub. And so that's what we use Clay for, is like to build that hot tub for us.
Do they use the term hot tub as like the ultimate account score?
Probably, yeah, internally. Yeah, I love it. I thought it was a really great phrase. I don't know if they took it from somewhere, but that's the first time I heard of it.
Yeah, it could be like ocean, pool, hot tub.
People talk about boiling the ocean.
Exactly. Yeah, I was talking to another customer, and they use Taco Bell hot sauce terms like Fire and Diablo to
love it
to rate their accounts. So you can have like a lot of fun with that. That's totally a separate topic. I really like the idea of like increasing your surface area to, it's almost like increase your luck of someone being able to like raise their hand or comment on something. So you're giving them more of an opportunity to actually like give you some sort of like signal. Actually, I found the job at Clay just by posting online. Ironically, like I knew Varun for 2 years or so, and I didn't talk to him recently, but I was like kind of posting about like what's next, my job interview, my interviews, and like what I was looking for, and kind of like the experience. And he was like, "Hey, you should come work over here." And since I was using Clay at a couple companies, I was like, that sounds like a lot of fun. So it's not only surface area for leads and finding like opportunities and like signals, but also I think what's key is building like your own personal brand online and demonstrating like your knowledge, because people want to connect with like people that are sharing and helping each other, or helping to teach like new things that they can like learn from.
And I think that's going to be increasingly important as we move forward, because using tools like Clay, as well as there's a whole bunch of like AI SDRs and stuff coming out right now. The purpose of somebody in sales, beyond like closing the deal, building those relationships, is being sort of a trusted business consultant.
Yeah.
So I really like how you guys call yourself GTM engineers. You're not AEs. And so you're like an engineer who can help somebody with their go-to-market. That sounds helpful to me, as opposed to something that's like almost like seller-centric. And so I think it's increasingly important for sellers to be able to showcase how they can help you, not just privately, but also publicly. Because a lot of the sort of rote work, I want to say, like the manual tasks, I think that's being increasingly automated, and that's where like GTM engineers come in. And so then that begs the question, like, what's the purpose of like your SDR and your BDR or your AE? And it's really like, be that face, be that person who can go to conferences, who can show up online, who can educate, who can build those relationships, create that canvas to collect those relationships. And then the systems like Clay and Letterdrop do all the rest. So I think like more sellers have to get into this mindset. And it's not just good for the company and hitting your quota and building pipeline, it's also good for you. People say
exactly, finding another.
Exactly, right. So you're now a person who has the skill, being able to publicly educate and attract customers. That's a valuable skill. And everybody looks at that and you're like, hey, Alex, like, you know how to do this well. You can do this well at company A, but you can also probably do this well at company B as well. And so I think a lot of people underestimate how good it is, not just for the company, but also for themselves.
So I had this kind of like hypothesis that you could actually, instead of doing outbound, you could use LinkedIn to build your own like inbound. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work, but it might. And if it works, that would be huge, because it's way more fun to create content and attract people and be creative that way than just going out and just like trying to chase down customers or like land meetings. So it's been interesting, because posting more on LinkedIn, I try and do like 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, doing the newsletter and sharing that, and then doing Letterdrop and taking the ideas from conversations, translating them into these posts. I've actually started to see people start coming inbound into my like LinkedIn. So it's a good topic, is like whenever a company's like scaling really fast, you can only grow inbound. The company can only grow inbound as fast, or you can never scale as fast as you can scale inbound. So you always have to revert to outbound at some point. You're always going to like hit a wall. But if you can start to build your own inbound that augments some of the outbound that you're doing, it just changes the whole dynamic of like how you go to market yourself to build your business. So I think that's been like really cool, and I wasn't really expecting that.
And you mentioned you've seen this before, right? You've been at companies where the sales team grew quite a bit, but the company's inbound didn't quite change, and now everyone's kind of like fighting to hit quota because they don't have enough pipeline. And so those are situations where you as an AE, you have to take matters into your own hands and figure out, okay, how do I can't just wait for marketing to figure out how to build it. I need to do this myself. And it's funny you say that. I think a lot of sellers don't see their role as a person who can do marketing, but sales and marketing, honestly, like, these are just terms. Like, at the end of the day, your customer doesn't care. They're just like, here's a person who has a solution for me. In fact, we closed our biggest customer, like in terms of employees, enterprise customer, Fluke, like close to like 10,000 employees, came in completely inbound, just like person DM'd me and said like, hey, I saw your post. I have that problem. Like, we should get on a call. And so you'd be surprised by the more you put out there, you're just creating the surface area for those to come in.
Wow, that's incredible. So I know you have some really cool workflows that you've built internally with Clay and Letterdrop and taking signals. We'd love to like dive into that and actually like see what you're doing inside Letterdrop to transform or to build a surface area, then gather the insights and then turn it into something like that's actionable that produces like pipeline. So why don't we dive into that?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that would be cool to show everyone. Cool, dude, I'm excited to dive into like what you built. I love building automations in Clay, and it's always cool to see what other people come up with because it's meant to be this like creative platform for growth. So yeah, what are you about to show us?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you. So we drive probably around 60-70% of our pipeline from LinkedIn. That's both inbound and outbound, right? Inbound is pretty easy. We're posting stuff using the flows that you mentioned in Letterdrop. But then there's this question of like, how do you do outbound in a way that's thoughtful and in a way that's organized? Because Letterdrop's just one of many sources for warm leads. Like we use our B2B, we send out a newsletter in HubSpot and people are downloading assets, opening things. We host webinars. So there are lots of sources of warm leads. And it became really chaotic for us to try to figure out, okay, how do we wrangle this? Who should we be working on? Because we only have so much time. And we want to give our top leads a personal touch. And then maybe for the rest, like we can use more automated outreach. And so I think that's really where we married Letterdrop and our B2B and Clay into this single system to help us capture warm leads, capture cold leads, account score them so that we can figure out who we want to outbound to. I'm going to show you just kind of what that flow looks like for us. So obviously we had talked about what you do with Letterdrop, which is like the creation flow, right? So these are all of our calls, and then we can very quickly sort of create thought leadership content and post it. And that's going to drive some inbound for us. And now there's this question of, okay, like what do we do with all the people who are starting to engage with me, the people who are in our orbit? So for example, if I go to my profile over here, you can see I have a lot of followers, I have a lot of connections. Look at all these people who are viewing my profile. Look at all these people who are sort of like engaging with me. For example, I want to like sort of figure out, okay, like, should I be doing anything about this? And then we have the same thing on our website, right? So we have all of these people we're identifying via our B2B. And a lot of it's just noise, but some of it's interesting. So Mary over here, she's a VP of sales. That's an interesting profile for us to go after. And so what we do is we actually take all of this data from our B2B, from Letterdrop, which I'll show you in a second, from SalesNav, and from other places. So previous champions who go to a new company, people who are downloading gated assets. And we take the people, if we have them, as well as the account, and then we push all of this into Clay. So I'll give you a preview of what data we're pushing into Clay first. So I showed you our B2B, and then the second source of data we're using is first-party engagement on LinkedIn. So these are all the people who have done things like followed me or commented on a post or anything along those lines with our team. And then we look at like certain types of folks which are interesting, like people in our ICP following the company page or liking our posts or following us but haven't connected. And so you can see that we are pushing these to webhooks, which eventually lead to Clay. And then we have the same thing for third-party data. So these are people who are talking about different topics that we care about. So anyone talking about social selling or thought leadership ads, or maybe they are talking about products that we co-sell really well with, like intent data on website, like we co-sell with that because you probably care about intent data from other sources. And so Letterdrop collects all of those for me as well, classifies them for me and tells me like, hey, what should I be doing? Should I be engaging, reaching out, scraping? And then we take this and then we also push this into Clay. And later on, what we will do is we will actually take these folks and then we'll also do a bunch of outreach to them, like liking their posts, warming them up, sending them a request, sending them a DM, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, so you can do comments now too.
Yeah, they'll draft up a comment for you and say like, hey, Alex, like, here's 6 people's posts I think you should comment on today. Here's a first draft of like what you might want to say. Do this. You're warming them up, nurturing them, so that eventually when you reach out to them, Alex is like a familiar face as opposed to just a person who's trying to book time with them.
I'm not using that one yet. I got
Yeah,
you got to onboard me to that use
For
case.
sure.
So I like that one.
So that's all our data over here. And the last one is just like pretty standard, like LinkedIn Sales Nav, right? So if I go to Sales Nav, I can build a whole bunch of lists. Letterdrop builds some lists for me. I have target leads from Letterdrop over here, 814 people in there. It's monitoring as well. But I build these lists and then I can kind of export them. And so our B2B has a Clay integration, which you can see over here. And then Letterdrop has webhooks. So if you look at my endpoints over here for new engaged leads, new scrape leads, and new posts from keyword monitoring, we have Clay tables, separate Clay tables for each of them. And so Letterdrop is pushing this data along with our B2B into Clay. And so I'll show you what those Clay tables look like. So this is our first party leads trigger in Clay. So these are all those people I showed you over here. A subset of them that Letterdrop chooses to send, like the people who passed this filter, those people eventually make their way into this Clay table. What we then do is we use Clay to answer some questions that we can't with Letterdrop. So things like, do they have an ICP job title? Do they have over 50 employees? In which case we want to actually start account scoring them. And so you can see on everybody meets that criteria. And so we push a subset of them over. And then it's the same thing with third-party leads. So these are not people who engage with us, but they've engaged with somebody else, or they're talking about something, and Letterdrop even tells us, like, hey, here's that last engaged post, and when that happened, same thing. It's taking a subset of them and pushing them into our account scoring table. And then this is the same thing from our B2B. People visiting our website, tells us which page they visited, pricing, a blog, etc. So all of this feeds into this single account scoring table, which I showed you earlier. And this is where the real magic happens with Clay. It is very manual right now for us to try to figure out, hey, is this account worth reaching out to? Sure, they have firmographic filters set up, like they have the right job title or they're in the right location. But I think most companies need to answer like deeper questions. And so what we did at Letterdrop for ourselves is we sat down and we asked ourselves, who are our best fit customers? Who retains? Who has really high ACV? And we wrote that down, and then we tried to think, okay, what are publicly observable pieces of information we can look for that we can automate or determine? And so then we sat down, wrote them all down, and figured out, okay, can we get these from Clay? Can we get these from Letterdrop? Can we get these from our B2B or other sources? And we essentially went through this list. And a lot of our columns in this Clay table essentially come from that analysis we did. So for example, we check with Clay if their CEO has been posting in the past month, or if the person who visited our site or engaged with us has been posting in the past month. That's probably an indication that we can try to get them to post more.
Do you find higher conversions with the CEOs that are
Totally.
posting more often because they get it?
Because at the very least, it tells us they get it to a certain degree, and then 2, they already have data that we can start collecting that they're just sitting on today. And so it's easier to sell to somebody like that as opposed to somebody who isn't even thinking about it. They're just like, oh yeah, LinkedIn's just for ads and spamming people with DMs. It's just a different conversation. We look for people with intent data. So we use the Clay built with integration. And so it tells us if they use demand base or 6 Sense or Clearbit. It tells us. And so that's another positive indication. We don't have to help you think about using signals now. It's really hard to be the first person to help you think about intent data. We'd rather have you be a company where like ZoomInfo or 6 Sense or somebody big has already educated you about that. And then now we're just like, oh, we're going to pile on top of that. So that's a good signal for us. And the rest of these are pretty common ones, which I think most companies can use, and you can just like rip this off of us. And I think the Clay University templates library has a lot of these. By the way, I didn't know anything about Clay when I started using this. I just built this entire system over a weekend. And
Over a weekend.
And the Clay Slack community is amazing. Like, people there, super helpful. I think you guys have a bot which can just answer questions too. But I built this with very little knowledge of Clay over the weekend, and now I feel like I'm probably like a 75th percentile, 80th percentile at Clay user. So a little shout out to the community over there.
Yeah, the community is awesome. Like, it's so like it's welcoming. It reminds me a lot of like open source.
Yes.
Where you help build something, but then you give it back. You learn from others. Everyone's sharing new ways of like doing things, and yeah, to me the Clay community reminds me a lot of like an open source community that's, you know, living and thriving and so on.
Absolutely. So this is stuff I figured out from templates in the community, but we figure out if they've recently hired decision makers and who they are. We figure out if they have open job postings in sales, demand gen, growth, RevOps. We figure out their sales headcount, obviously Letterdrop's efficacy scales with the size of their sales team. And then we actually use Clayagents, works to a certain degree in terms of scraping their website and trying to figure out who they sell to. So since we're a platform that sits on top of LinkedIn, helps people create more on LinkedIn, if your buyer is not on LinkedIn, we can't help you. So we look for people who sell into sales, marketing, HR, or industries where it's really hard for them to cold email. So CTOs, cybersecurity, they're apprehensive of cold outreach. You have to educate them first. And so those are industries we do really well with. And Clay actually helps go to their website and kind of make a first guess in terms of who they sell with. And I think like this gets probably like 70, 80% of those people over here, which is fairly good. And then our B2B and Letterdrop send us assets, last engaged asset and date. And so these give us context in terms of outreach. It's not, we know like that they've engaged with us in some capacity. They read a blog post, they'd like to post. And so we can use that in our outreach. And if they're a warm lead, we boost our score up. And so this is where with Clay, we actually do the account scoring. And so we give different weightages to each of these individual features. I'm using machine learning terminology at this point, but we have like features. Each of them has individual weights or scores. So like you get like 1 point if your CEO is posted on LinkedIn, et cetera. And then you get a lot of points if you're warm. And the reason why we do that is because we've discovered over the past 2 quarters, we can book meetings with warm leads at 4 times the rate of a cold lead. It's crazy for us to ignore somebody who's showing signs of being aware of us or being in market. And so what this lets us do is not only find best fit accounts, but also find warm leads as well. And I made a post about this recently, and there's a good diagram of how you should think about reaching out to customers. This is your TAM. You want to be reaching out to, like, it's actually a waste of your time to go spam your TAM. You want to focus on your best fit companies. And most of these are going to be cold. And then you have some warm leads, but a lot of those warm leads are maybe not qualified. You don't want to reach out to them. There's this little nugget or a golden area, Goldilocks zone, where you need to reach out to these people ASAP. And so our B2B and Letterdrop find these for us. And then Clay helps us understand if they fit within the best fit companies and scores them for us so that we can then sort by score and then reach out to them. And so that is our sort of like entire flow, how we figure out what are the top 50, 100, whatever X accounts that we should be reaching out to from our biz dev team every single week. And in a way that keeps us efficient, in a way that doesn't waste BD time, and also doesn't annoy people or like doesn't have us spamming the market and like praying to God that we can find some meetings.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's still so many companies that are just creating long lists and just going out there and praying. But yeah, that shows there's so many ways you can be more thoughtful about how you find people, target them, understand them, then follow up with like the right message that's relevant and like timely. So yeah, I really love this flow. And if you go back to the diagram with the TAM, so like the TAM is the ocean. Going back to your analogy, the TAM is the ocean, the best fit companies is like the pool, and then that place in the middle is like the hot tub.
Yeah.
with concierge, a bartender that comes and brings you drinks while you're hanging out in the hot tub.
Yeah. I think that's a really good analogy. And like when people say boil the ocean, like that's the same as spraying and praying your TAM. Essentially, it just does not work.
Very cool. Well, I love that. That's a great overview of like Clay, Letterdrop, how you're using it internally. Also, just the importance of like LinkedIn. Outside of all that, I also have another question since you're in SEO at Google. Now that there's all these AI search engines like Perplexity and ChatGPT, now it's more connected to like the internet. Is there a different way to do SEO today that helps optimize for content showing up in the LLMs or the output of like, say, a Perplexity? So I don't even know what to call that, like AI SEO.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to think, and there's companies popping up around this too, trying to do that. But I think it's very uncertain because things are changing so fast. So if you think about how these products give you information, there are two inputs. There's the LLM, and its input is the training data. So this is OpenAI, like ingesting every YouTube video on the internet, ingesting like every web page, ingesting every PDF. And then the second input is actually just a layer on top of Google. Like these products are visiting Google and like looking at the Google results, or they're visiting websites. The same way that Claygen actually visits websites and pulls information, right? Claygen doesn't, in theory, has some information on a company, but it doesn't have the latest information and it has to visit the website and scrape it in order to give you that. So given that those are your two inputs, one of those inputs is still Google. So traditional
Still SEO.
Yeah.
SEO is still there.
So traditional SEO will help you because these tools are just essentially a layer on top of that. And you can still control that to a certain degree by following the best practices that Google recommends. I think the SEO world is just plagued with a lot of bad actors, a lot of spam, a lot of like copying, a lot of not net new information or information gain. And then there's what goes into the LLMs. You can't control that. OpenAI trains their models like once every year, and that costs billions and billions of dollars to do. And whatever cutoff date they have and whatever goes into that is pretty much it. And you're being mixed in with all of the spam on Tumblr and Reddit, as well as the YouTube videos. And it's essentially just building a model of the world. It's not necessarily trained towards a certain type of clean data set. And you can't really control that. I guess one way to maybe control that is to somehow just create a massive amount of like pages and videos and content and Reddit comments and stuff that gets into the model on their next training, and all of it has the message that says the things you want to say into it. It makes the model think that that is true or that is the world. That's a much harder undertaking, and so I think it's almost pointless to try to gamify the system, and instead companies should just follow like normal best practice SEO stuff, push out marketing, push out content, because if you stay silent, like your competitors will, and they'll influence these models. And I think the second thing is don't forget your people. This is why we're talking about LinkedIn. And look, if your audience is not on LinkedIn, that's fine. It might be Twitter, it might be something else, it might be Discord. Figure out what that is for you. For the vast majority of us in B2B, it is LinkedIn. Think about your people, think about their face-to-face relationships, and think about how they can sort of be the megaphone for some of this content, because I think a lot of people are getting to the place where they're looking for these information curators. I can trust Alex because he has all this history around GTM engineering. I can look at Perplexity or ChatGPT and I'm sure it'll get me so far, but it's not like there's no accountability. There's no like ChatGPT hasn't gone and built a clay table for somebody, but Alex has, and he's talked to all of these Fortune 500 companies and enterprises or mid-market companies which have. And so I'm much more inclined to trust you with this regarding this information, and then maybe use that as a sort of like navigational tool to get some other complementary information.
That's a great point. Well, man, Karthik, thanks for joining us today. This was like, I really enjoyed the conversation and lots of good insights to share with everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love joining you guys in the studio.
Awesome.